The Tesla never showed up. Elon Musk stood outside the Beverly Hills Hotel at 11:47 p.m., watching his phone screen refresh for the third time. The black Model S he'd ordered under the name Edward Morris had vanished from the app. In its place, a beat-up silver Prius crawled toward the curb, license plate matching his ride. He almost canceled. The SpaceX board meeting had been moved up 12 hours. Classified propulsion data that couldn't wait for morning. But the next available ride was 23 minutes out, and time was bleeding away. The Prius stopped. Through the windshield, Elon saw a man in his 60s, salt and pepper beard, flannel shirt. Not the usual Tesla-driving tech worker, who recognized him instantly. Elon slid into the back seat. The interior smelled like coffee and old leather. No conversation. No, oh my God, you're Elon Musk. Just the quiet hum of the hybrid engine and classical music. Something baroque, precise. SpaceX facility in Hawthorne. Elon said. The driver's eyes found his in the rear-view mirror, which entranced. Most people said the main one or asked for an address. This driver knew SpaceX had multiple access points. Gate 7, executive level. The Prius merged into late-night traffic on Wilshire. Elon opened his laptop, scanning through propulsion system diagnostics. The Raptor engine data was clean, but something nagged at him. A thermal coefficient that should have been flagged by quality control. That's a heat signature problem. The driver said quietly. Elon's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. He looked up. In the mirror, the driver's eyes were focused on the road, but his comment had been precise. Too precise. I'm sorry. Your screen, the red zones in the thermal map. You've got coolant flow irregularities at the combustion chamber interface. Probably a sensor calibration issue, not actual overheating. Elon closed the laptop. He studied the back of the driver's head. Graying hair, confident posture. The classical music continued, boxed mathematical precision filling the silence. You work in aerospace? Used to. The driver took the 405 south, avoiding construction that most people didn't know about. His hands were steady on the wheel, and when he changed lanes, he checked blind spots twice. Military precision. What kind of work? Systems integration. Propulsion analysis. Long time ago. They passed a Tesla supercharger station. Elon watched 3 Model 3s plugged in, their charging ports glowing green in the darkness. Strange to be in a hybrid when his own car surrounded him. Which company? The driver was quiet for 30 seconds. Elon counted. When someone hesitated that long, they were either lying or remembering something they tried to forget. NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, then some private consulting. The exit for Hawthorne appeared ahead. Most drivers would have moved to the right lane already, but this one waited, timing the merge perfectly. No wasted motion. JPL's impressive work. Mars missions, deep space probes. What projects? Mars sample return. Thermal protection systems for atmospheric entry. Some classified stuff I can't discuss. Elon leaned forward. Mars sample return had been scrapped in 2019, budget cuts and political pressure. But the thermal protection work, that was current. SpaceX was developing similar systems for Starship's Mars landing capability. The sample return program was challenging. Technical hurdles, funding issues. Technical hurdles were solved. Politics killed it. The bitterness in the driver's voice was controlled but unmistakable. Elon recognized it. The frustration of engineers who watch good projects die. For bad reasons. They turned onto Crenshaw Boulevard. SpaceX's facility came into view. Floodlights illuminating the rocket garden where Falcon 9 boosters stood like metal monuments. The driver slowed, approaching Gate 7 without needing directions. You know this area well. I've been here before. Years ago, different circumstances. The security checkpoint appeared ahead. Elon would need to show ID, explain why he was arriving so late. The board meeting materials were encrypted on his phone, ready for review, but he found himself wanting to continue the conversation. "Can you pull over here for a minute?" The driver glanced in the mirror. "Everything okay?" "Just need to make a call." The Prius stopped in the visitor parking area. Elon didn't make a call. He turned to face the driver directly for the first time. The man was older than he'd first appeared, maybe 65. His eyes were sharp, intelligent. The kind of eyes that had spent years solving problems other people couldn't solve. There were small scars on his hands. Workshop scars, the kind that came from building things with precision tools. "I'm curious about something," Elon said. "The thermal coefficient issue you mentioned, how did you spot that so quickly?" "Experience. When you've run thousands of simulations, you recognize the patterns." "What kind of simulations?" The driver's expression shifted slightly. Caution replacing openness. Atmospheric entry. Heat shield performance. Landing system stress analysis. Those weren't general terms. They were specific to the kind of work SpaceX was doing right now. Work that wasn't public knowledge. Mars landing systems? Among other things. Elon felt a familiar sensation he got when a problem was about to reveal its solution. The pieces weren't quite there yet, but the pattern was forming. You ever work on autonomous landing protocols? I wrote some of the original algorithms. The words hung in the air between them. Original algorithms. Not implementation. Not testing. Creation. For NASA? For Mars landers that never launched. Elon's phone buzzed. The board meeting reminder. He glanced at it, then back at the driver. "What's your name?" "Julian Barrett." "Julian, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Julian's hands were still on the steering wheel, but his posture had changed. Alert. "Ready? You ever work in aerospace?" Julian's eyes met his in the mirror. For a moment, neither man spoke. The classical music had ended, leaving only the quiet hum of the Prius engine and distant freeway traffic. "I used to run simulations for Mars landers." Julian's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Pride, regret, history, used to. Things change. Funding gets cut. Project get canceled. People move on. And you moved on to driving for Uber? Everyone needs to eat. Elon felt his phone buzz again. The meeting was important. Critical propulsion data. Board decisions that would affect thousands of employees. But something about Julian Barrett didn't add up. The casual expertise, the specific knowledge, the way he navigated a SpaceX without GPS. "Julian, how long ago did you leave NASA?" 3 years. "And you've been driving full-time since then?" "Part-time. I do some consulting, technical writing, peer review for academic journals." "What kind of consulting?" Julian was quiet again, longer this time. Elon watched him in the mirror, studying the micro-expressions, the slight tightening around the eyes, the careful control, systems analysis, failure prediction, risk assessment, all critical skills, all things SpaceX needed, all expertise that shouldn't be driving a Prius at midnight. "Julian, I'm going to be direct with you. You know who I am, right?" "Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX and Tesla. I've been following your company's work." "Following how closely?" "Close enough to know that your Raptor engine cluster configuration has some thermal management challenges that haven't been fully resolved." Elon blinked. That information wasn't public. The Raptor's thermal issues were known internally, but the specific cluster configuration data was classified. "How do you know about the cluster configuration?" "I read the technical papers." I make educated guesses based on public test data. I've been doing this for 40 years. It was possible. Someone with deep expertise could extrapolate from limited information, but Julian's assessment had been too precise, too confident. Julian, what if I told you I need someone to look at exactly that problem? Someone with your background. I'd say you got plenty of qualified people already. What if I told you I'm not so sure about that? Julian turned in his seat to face him directly. His expression was serious, professional. No trace of the casual Uber driver who'd picked him up 20 minutes earlier. Mr. Musk, I appreciate the conversation, but you don't know me, and you don't know why I left NASA. There are reasons people end up driving for Uber at my age. What reasons? Julian started to respond, then stopped. He looked out the windshield at the SpaceX facility, rocket silhouetted against the night sky. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some reputations can't be rebuilt. What kind of mistakes? The kind that cost lives. The words hit the air like a physical impact. Elon felt his chest tighten. Julian's voice had dropped, and there was pain in it now. Real pain. Julian, the meeting's important, right? You should go. Elon looked at his phone. 12:23 a.m. The board would be assembling soon, expecting him to review critical data and make decisions about the future of human spaceflight. But Julian Barrett was still looking at the rockets, and there was something in his expression that Elon recognized. The look of someone who had built things that mattered, who had solved problems that changed the world, and who had lost it all. You ever work in aerospace? Elon asked again, quietly. Julian's grip tightened on the steering wheel. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I used to run simulations for Mars landers. Julian Barrett turned off the Prius engine completely. The silence was absolute except for the distant hum of SpaceX's night operations and the occasional rumble of late-night traffic on the 405. You want to know why I left NASA? Julian's voice was steady, but his hands remained gripped on the steering wheel. It wasn't because of the accident. It was because of what I found out 3 days after. Elon leaned forward. What did you find out? That the thermal calculations weren't wrong by accident. The words hung in the air like a charge waiting to detonate. Julian turned in his seat to face Elon directly, and for the first time, Elon saw the full weight of what the man had been carrying. Meridian Systems didn't make mistakes, Mr. Musk. They made deliberate alterations to safety margins. Small ones, the kind that would pass initial review but fail under extreme conditions. Why would they do that? Cost savings, faster approval cycles, and because they were feeding the same flawed data to multiple clients, creating a competitive advantage for whoever was getting the correct calculations. Elon felt his chest tighten. Who was getting the correct calculations? That's what I spent 2 years trying to figure out. That's why my security clearance was revoked. That's why I was terminated under circumstances requiring legal review. Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather notebook. He opened it to a page covered in precise handwriting, technical diagrams, and what looked like organizational charts. 3 engineers were hospitalized during that simulation because the thermal protection system failed at exactly 68% of design load. Not 70%, not 65%, 68%. That's not a random failure, Mr. Musk. That's a calculated margin reduction. You investigated this yourself? I spent every day for 18 months going through data, cross-referencing contractor submissions, analyzing failure patterns across multiple missions. Julian flipped through pages of meticulous notes. Meridian had active contracts with NASA, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing. But the failure patterns weren't random. What do you mean? NASA projects failed. Blue Origin projects had issues. But SpaceX projects were mysteriously clean. At least They were until 18 months ago. Elon's phone buzzed again. The board meeting. But he ignored it completely now. You're saying Meridian was sabotaging some clients while protecting others? I'm saying Meridian was playing favorites. And I'm saying that whoever was receiving the favored treatment stopped receiving it around the time your company terminated their contract. How do you know when we terminated them? Julian almost smiled, because that's when your Raptor engine thermal issues started showing up in the test data. The implications hit Elon like a physical blow. If Julian was right, then SpaceX had been protected by a contractor who was sabotaging competitors. And when that protection ended, the real problem started emerging. Julian, do you have proof of this? I had proof. Documents, communications, financial records showing payment discrepancies between contracts. Everything I needed to expose the whole operation. My home was broken into 6 weeks before my termination hearing. Nothing valuable was taken. Just my research files, my backup drives, and my copies of the contractor communications. Julian closed a notebook and looked out at the SpaceX facility. 3 good engineers spent weeks in the hospital because I trusted a contractor's calculations. My career ended because I tried to prove those calculations were deliberately falsified. And somewhere out there, the people responsible are still doing business. Elon pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Julian, when you investigated Meridian, did you identify specific individuals? People inside the company who might have been responsible for the alterations? One person, a senior thermal systems analyst named Dr. Sarah Chun. She had signature authority on all the major aerospace contracts. Every falsified calculation I could trace led back to her approval. Where is she now? Julian was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. That's something you're going to need to find out for yourself. Elon was already dialing. The phone rang twice before Tom answered. Elon, I'm still pulling the Barrett files. This is going to take. Tom, different question. I need you to run a personnel search. Current SpaceX employees who previously worked for a contractor called Meridian Systems. That's easier. Give me 30 seconds. Julian watched Elon's face as they waited. There was resignation there, but also something else. A quiet satisfaction that came from finally being able to tell the truth. Elon, I've got it. We have 4 former Meridian employees currently on staff. 2 in manufacturing, 1 in quality control, and 1 in systems integration. Names: manufacturing, Rodriguez and Kim. Quality control, Patterson. Systems integration, Dr. Sarah Chun. Julian closed his eyes. Tom, what's Dr. Chen's current position? Senior Thermal Systems Analyst. She's been with us for 16 months. Hired right after we terminated the Meridian contract. Her references were excellent, and her technical background was exactly what we needed for the Raptor engine development. Where is she right now? Probably at home. But Elon, she's scheduled to present thermal analysis findings at tomorrow's board meeting. Actually, today's board meeting. The one you're supposed to be attending in 20 minutes. Elon ended the call. Julian was watching him with an expression of quiet vindication. She's presenting thermal analysis findings at the board meeting, the same meeting where you'll be making critical decisions about Raptor engine production and Mars mission timelines. Julian, if you're right about this, then Dr. Chin has been feeding us compromised data for over a year. I'm right about this. Julian opened his notebook again and turned to a page covered with technical calculations. Because I've been reverse engineering your public test data for 6 months, and I can see the same signature errors that destroyed my career at NASA. He pointed to a series of equations. This is the thermal coefficient calculation for atmospheric entry at Mars gravity. This is what it should look like. He flipped the page. This is what it looks like when someone reduces the safety margin by exactly 12% while maintaining mathematical consistency. Elon studied the calculations. The differences were subtle, but they were there. The kind of alterations that would pass initial review, but create catastrophic failures under real-world conditions. Julian, how many people could make these kind of changes without being detected? Maybe 20 people in the entire aerospace industry. It requires deep expertise in thermodynamics, material science, and systems integration, plus access to the original calculations and the ability to maintain mathematical consistency while introducing specific failure points. And Dr. Chin has all those qualifications? Dr. Chin wrote the textbook on thermal protection systems for Mars entry vehicles. Literally, it's the standard reference for the industry. Elon felt his phone buzzing again. The board meeting was starting. Critical decisions about the future of human spaceflight, based on thermal analysis data provided by someone who might be deliberately sabotaging the project. Julian, what do you want from this? What's your end game? Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 years of exile and the quiet determination of someone who had never stopped caring about the work. I want to prevent another accident. I want to make sure that what happened to those 3 engineers at NASA doesn't happen to your crew when they attempt Mars entry. And I want to prove that I was right about Meridian systems, even if it's too late to save my own career. What if it's not too late? What do you mean? Elon looked at the SpaceX facility, then at Julian Barrett, a 65-year-old former NASA engineer who had lost everything trying to expose conspiracy, now sitting in a Prius at midnight with the mathematical proof that SpaceX might be walking into the same trap. Julian, what if I told you I believe you? What if I told you I think Dr. Chin is feeding us compromised data, and that tomorrow's board meeting might be designed to get approval for thermal systems that will fail during Mars entry? I'd say you need to be very careful about your next moves. Because if I'm right, then Dr. Chin knows that someone is getting close to the truth, and the people behind this operation have already demonstrated they're willing to destroy careers and endanger lives to protect their interests. What would you do if you were in my position? Julian closed a notebook and looked directly at Elon. I'd bring in an independent expert to verify the thermal calculations before making any board decisions. Someone with deep experience in Mars entry systems and no connection to Meridian or any of its former employees. Someone like you? Someone exactly like me. Elon's phone rang. The board meeting was starting without him. Critical decisions were being made based on potentially compromised data, and the future of human spaceflight might depend on the choices made in the next hour. Julian, how long would it take you to review the thermal data and identify any problems? If I had access to the raw calculations and the original contractor submissions, maybe 2 hours. Less if the alterations follow the same patterns I identified at NASA. And if you found problems, then you'd have mathematical proof that your thermal protection systems are designed to fail, and you'd know exactly who was responsible. Elon made a decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed Tom's number again. Tom, I need you to do something for me right now. Elon, the board is asking where you are. Dr. Chun is about to start her presentation. Tell them I'm dealing with a security issue that requires immediate attention. Tell them to postpone any decisions about thermal systems until I arrive. A security issue? Tom, I need you to gather all the thermal analysis data for the Raptor engines. Everything. Raw calculations, contractor submissions, safety margin assessments, failure analysis reports. Everything we have. That's a lot of data. What's this about? I'm bringing in an independent consultant to verify our thermal calculations. Someone who specializes in identifying calculation errors and safety margin problems. Julian was watching him with an expression of growing hope. Tom, I'm also going to need a secure workstation set up in conference room 7. Full access to engineering databases, but isolated from the main network. Can you do that? It'll take me 20 minutes. You have 15. Elon ended the call and turned to Julian. Julian Barrett, I'm about to offer you something that might change both of our lives. What's that? A chance to prove you were right. A chance to prevent the kind of accident that destroyed your career. And a chance to make sure that when humans land on Mars, they're using thermal protection systems that were designed to work, not designed to fail. Julian's grip on the steering wheel loosened for the first time since they'd started talking. What do you need from me? I need you to come inside that facility and show me exactly what's wrong with our thermal calculations. I need you to identify every alteration, every compromised safety margin, every deliberate error that might cause a catastrophic failure. And then we're going to walk into that board meeting with mathematical proof of what's been happening. And we're going to make sure that Dr. Sarachin never has another opportunity to endanger lives. Julian started the Prius engine. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of an engineer who had spent 40 years solving impossible problems. Mr. Musk, what gate did you say you needed? Gate 7, executive level. Then let's go prove that I was right about everything. Julian put the car in drive and headed toward the SpaceX facility. In the distance, the rocket stood silhouetted against the night sky, waiting for the thermal protection systems that would either carry humans safely to Mars or become monuments to another engineering failure. As they approached the security checkpoint, Elon pulled out his phone one more time. Tom, we're about to have a very interesting board meeting. How interesting? Elon looked at Julian Barrett, former NASA engineer turned Uber driver, about to walk back into the aerospace industry with the mathematical proof that could expose a conspiracy 3 years in the making. Put me on with the Falcon integration team. Right now. Julian Barrett had not set foot inside an aerospace facility in 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The SpaceX security guard scanned Elon's badge twice, glanced at Julian's driver's license, and waved them through without question. Julian expected questions. Instead, he found himself walking through corridors lined with photographs of successful launches, past conference rooms where engineers worked through the night, toward the kind of cutting-edge aerospace development he had helped pioneer and then been exiled from. This way, Elon said, leading him toward an elevator bank. Conference room 7 is on the 3rd floor. Tom should have everything ready. The elevator doors opened to reveal a young woman in a SpaceX polo shirt, tablet in hand, looking harried. She glanced at Elon, then at Julian, then back at Elon with obvious confusion. Mr. Musk? The board is asking about the delay. Dr. Chen has been waiting to present her thermal analysis for 20 minutes. Tell them we're addressing a critical systems issue that could affect the safety of future Mars missions. Tell them I'll be there shortly with additional expertise. Additional expertise? Elon gestured toward Julian. This is Dr. Julian Barrett. He'll be consulting on our thermal protection systems. The woman's eyes widened slightly. Should I add him to the meeting roster? Yes. List him as senior consulting engineer, thermal systems. Julian felt something twist in his chest. Senior consulting engineer. A title he hadn't held in 3 years. Conference room 7 was a glass-walled space overlooking the rocket garden. Tom was waiting inside, surrounded by laptops, external drives, and printed documents arranged in precise stacks. Elon, I've got everything you requested. Raw thermal calculations, contractor submissions going back 18 months, safety margin assessments, and failure analysis reports, plus some additional data I thought might be relevant. What kind of additional data? Personnel files for Dr. Chen, including her work history at Meridian Systems, and some interesting financial records that might be relevant to your security concerns. Julian approached the workstation. The screens displayed thermodynamics equations, heat transfer calculations, and material stress analysis data. The familiar mathematics of atmospheric entry and thermal protection systems. This is everything? Julian asked. Everything we have, plus some data I'm not supposed to have access to. Julian sat down and began scrolling through calculations. Within 30 seconds, he was deep in the mathematical relationships that govern spacecraft survival during Mars atmospheric entry. Tom, Elon said, I need you to contact everyone on the Falcon integration team and ask them to come in right now. Right now? It's almost 2 a.m. Right now. Tell them we have a potential safety issue that requires immediate review. How many people are we talking about? Everyone. Propulsion specialists, thermal engineers, systems integration experts. Everyone who works on atmospheric entry and thermal protection. Tom looked confused. Elon, that's going to be at least 15 people. What's this about? Elon glanced at Julian, who was already identifying problems in the thermal calculations, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the speed of someone who had spent decades doing this kind of analysis. Tom, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we're ready to present it to the board. Understood? Understood. We have reason to believe that our thermal protection systems contain deliberately introduced errors that could cause catastrophic failure during Mars atmospheric entry. Tom's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. What kind of errors? The kind that would pass initial review but fail under real-world conditions. The kind that could kill an entire crew. Julian looked up from the workstation. Mr. Musk, you need to see this. Elon and Tom approached the screens. Julian had isolated a series of thermal coefficient calculations and displayed them alongside what appeared to be reference calculations. This is a thermal protection analysis for atmospheric entry at Mars gravity and atmospheric density, Julian said, pointing to the left screen. This is what Dr. Chin submitted for board review. He pointed to the right screen. This is what the calculation should look like. The differences were subtle but consistent. Safety margins reduced by precise percentages. Heat transfer coefficients adjusted within acceptable ranges but toward failure thresholds. How certain are you about this? Tom asked. 100% certain. These aren't random errors or calculation mistakes. These are deliberate alterations following a specific pattern designed to compromise system safety while maintaining mathematical consistency. Tom left the conference room to contact the integration team. Julian continued working through the thermal calculations, building a comprehensive analysis of the compromised data. Julian, how extensive is this? Every major calculation, atmospheric entry, heat shield performance, thermal protection during landing, emergency abort scenarios. Dr. Chin has systematically compromised every aspect of your Mars thermal protection systems. For how long? Based on the file timestamps since she started working here. 16 months of deliberate sabotage. Elon felt his chest tighten. 16 months of engineering development based on compromised calculations. Hundreds of millions of dollars in research and development. Critical decisions about crew safety and mission parameters. Julian, if we had proceeded with these calculations, what would have happened during an actual Mars mission? Julian was quiet for a moment, his expression grave. Catastrophic thermal protection failure during atmospheric entry. Complete loss of crew and vehicle. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elon stared at the calculations on the screen, each one representing a deliberate step toward disaster. Tom returned with 15 engineers from the Falcon integration team. They looked tired, confused, and concerned about being called in for an emergency meeting at 2 a.m. Everyone, Elon said, I want you to meet Dr. Julian Barrett. He's been consulting on thermal protection systems. and he's identified some serious problems with our Mars atmospheric entry calculations. Julian stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in aerospace engineering, "we have a problem." He turned to the screens displaying the compromised thermal calculations. "Your thermal protection systems for Mars atmospheric entry have been systematically compromised by deliberate calculation errors designed to cause catastrophic failure during real-world conditions." The room was silent. Julian continued, "These errors were introduced by someone with deep expertise in thermodynamics and access to your core engineering data. Someone who knew exactly how to compromise system safety while maintaining mathematical consistency." One of the engineers raised her hand. "Dr. Barrett, are you saying someone has been deliberately sabotaging our Mars mission calculations?" "I'm saying someone has been deliberately sabotaging your Mars mission calculations for at least 16 months. And that person is scheduled to present those compromised calculations to your board of directors in approximately 30 minutes. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. Julian could see the engineers processing the information, understanding the magnitude of what he was suggesting. "Dr. Barrett," another engineer said, "can you prove this?" Julian smiled. For the first time in 3 years, he was being asked to prove his expertise rather than defend his reputation. "Give me a whiteboard in 30 minutes. I'll show you exactly how thermal protection systems are compromised, exactly who did it, and exactly what would happen if you proceeded with the current calculations." Tom wheeled a large whiteboard to the front of the conference room. Julian picked up a marker and began writing equations. Within minutes, he was deep in the mathematics of atmospheric entry, heat transfer coefficients, and thermal protection system design. The engineers leaned forward, following his calculations, asking technical questions, challenging his assumptions. Julian answered every question with precision and confidence. He explained the physics of Mars atmospheric entry, the materials science of thermal protection systems, and the subtle mathematical alterations that could turn life-saving technology into death traps. 30 minutes later, the room was silent. 15 of SpaceX's best engineers sat staring at a whiteboard covered with calculations that proved their Mars thermal protection systems were designed to fail. "Questions?" Julian asked. A senior propulsion engineer raised his hand. "Dr. Barrett, assuming you're correct about these alterations, what will be the timeline for correcting them?" 6 months to recalculate everything from first principles. Another 6 months for testing and validation. Assuming we can identify and eliminate all sources of compromised data. And if we proceeded with the current calculations? Julian's expression was grave. Complete loss of crew during Mars atmospheric entry. No survivors. The room was absolutely quiet. Finally, Tom spoke. "Elon, what do you want to do?" Elon looked around the room at 15 engineers who now understood the stakes, then at Julian Barrett, who had spent 3 years in exile for trying to prevent exactly this kind of disaster. "I want to walk into that board meeting and give Dr. Chin exactly what she's not expecting, which is the opportunity to defend her thermal calculations in front of someone who knows exactly what she's been doing." Julian closed the marker and faced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 15 minutes, we're going to expose a conspiracy that's been endangering lives and compromising critical aerospace projects for at least 4 years." Julian turned to Elon. "Mr. Musk, are you ready to walk into that boardroom?" "Julian, before we do this, I need to tell you something." "What's that?" Elon's expression shifted slightly. There was something there Julian hadn't seen before. A calculation, a plan that had been in motion longer than their midnight conversation. "Julian, when you asked me if I ever work in aerospace, and I kept asking you the same question, there was a reason for that." "What reason?" "I knew who you were before I got into your car tonight." Julian felt the floor shift beneath him. "What do you mean?" I mean, the ride wasn't random. The canceled Tesla wasn't an accident, and your Prius showing up instead wasn't a coincidence. The room was completely silent. Julian stared at Elon, processing the implications. You've been planning this? Julian, I've been trying to figure out how to approach you for 6 weeks. Ever since Tom's security analysis flagged irregularities in our thermal calculations and suggested they might be related to contractor issues from your NASA days. You knew about the Meridian connection? I knew there was a connection. I knew Dr. Chin had worked for Meridian. I knew your career had ended over thermal calculation problems involving the same contractor, but I didn't know the extent of it until tonight. Julian sat down heavily. 3 years of exile, 6 months of driving for Uber, 47 rides, hoping for a chance encounter with someone from SpaceX. And Elon had been looking for him the entire time. Why didn't you just contact me directly? Because a disgraced ex-NASA engineer making accusations against a current SpaceX employee would have been dismissed as workplace revenge. But a consultant who independently identified the same problems would have credibility. Julian almost laughed. So you set up an elaborate sting operation to give me the chance to prove my theories? I set up an opportunity for the truth to emerge naturally. Julian stood up and walked to the whiteboard, staring at the calculations he'd just used to prove everything he believed for 3 years. Mr. Musk, you still don't know why I left NASA. Then tell me. Julian turned to face the room. 15 engineers and the CEO of SpaceX, all waiting for the final piece of a puzzle that had been 3 years in the making. I left NASA because I discovered that Dr. Sarachin wasn't just providing compromised calculations to multiple aerospace contractors. I discovered that she was part of a larger operation designed to ensure that certain companies succeeded while others failed. What kind of operation? Industrial espionage, corporate sabotage, a systematic effort to control the direction of human space exploration by eliminating competition and concentrating advanced aerospace capability in the hands of a small group of preferred companies. The room was absolutely silent. Mr. Musk, when you terminated Meridian's contract 18 months ago, you didn't just lose a contractor. You became a target. Elon felt his phone buzzing. The board meeting. Dr. Chin waiting to present her compromised thermal calculations. Critical decisions about Mars mission approval based on data designed to cause catastrophic failure. Julian, are you ready to walk into that boardroom and prove everything you just told us? Julian looked around the room at 15 engineers who now understood the stakes, then at Elon Musk, who had spent 6 weeks orchestrating an opportunity for the truth to emerge. Mr. Musk, I've been ready for 3 years. Then let's go make sure Dr. Chin gets the kind of technical review she deserves. Julian picked up his evidence folders and headed toward the door. As they left conference room 7, Tom called after them. Elon, what should I tell the board about the delay? Elon smiled for the first time since the conversation had started. Tell them we're bringing in additional expertise to ensure Dr. Chen's thermal analysis receives the thorough technical review it deserves. As they walked toward the elevator, Julian turned to Elon one more time. Mr. Musk, you still don't know why I refused your contract offer earlier. Why did you refuse it? Julian's expression was serious, but there was something else there now. The quiet confidence of an engineer who was about to prove that 40 years of experience and 3 years of exile had been leading to this moment. Because I want to make sure you understood exactly what you were getting into before you made the offer again. The elevator doors opened. As they stepped inside, Elon's phone rang. Tom's voice came through the speaker. Elon, Dr. Chin is asking when you'll be ready for her presentation. What should I tell her? Julian and Elon looked at each other. 3 years of investigation, 6 weeks of planning, and 30 minutes of mathematical proof were about to converge in a boardroom. where the future of human space exploration would be decided. "Tell her we're ready now," Elon said. "Tell her we're looking forward to her presentation." The SpaceX boardroom occupied the entire fourth-floor corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rocket garden and the 405 freeway beyond. At 2:47 a.m., it was illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights and the glow of multiple projection screens displaying thermal analysis data. 8 board members sat around a polished conference table, tablets and coffee cups scattered between them. At the head of the table, Dr. Sarah Chun stood next to a presentation screen, laser pointer in hand, looking increasingly impatient. She was younger than Julian had expected, mid-40s, precise movements, the kind of controlled professional demeanor that came from years of presenting technical data to people who control hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. "Dr. Chun," Elon said as he entered the room, "thank you for your patience. I brought additional expertise to review your thermal analysis." Julian stepped into the room behind Elon. Dr. Chen's eyes found his immediately, and Julian saw something flicker across her expression. Not recognition exactly, but calculation, the look of someone processing unexpected variables. "Board members," Elon continued, "this is Dr. Julian Barrett, Senior Consulting Engineer for Thermal Systems. He'll be reviewing Dr. Chen's findings from an independent perspective." Julian took a seat at the conference table. Dr. Chen's presentation materials were scattered in front of him. Printed calculations, technical diagrams, safety assessments for Mars atmospheric entry systems. "Dr. Barrett," one of the board members said, "what's your background in thermal protection systems?" 40 years in aerospace engineering. 25 years at JPL working on atmospheric entry systems for Mars missions. Most recently, Mars sample return thermal protection development. Dr. Chen's grip tightened slightly on her laser pointer. "Dr. Chun," Elon said, "please proceed with your presentation. Dr. Barrett will review your calculations as you present them." "Of course." Dr. Chen's voice was steady, professional. "As you can see from the thermal analysis data, our Raptor engine systems are within acceptable safety parameters for Mars atmospheric entry." She clicked to the first slide. Julian recognized the calculations immediately. The same compromised thermal coefficients he'd identified in Conference Room 7. The heat shield performance modeling shows adequate protection during atmospheric deceleration, with safety margins of approximately 15% above minimum requirements. Julian was taking notes, but he was also watching Dr. Chen's presentation style. Confident, authoritative, the kind of technical briefing designed to reassure decision-makers rather than invite detailed scrutiny. "Dr. Chun," Julian said quietly, "could you explain how you calculated the atmospheric density coefficients for Mars entry?" Standard atmospheric modeling based on seasonal variations and entry trajectory optimization. Which seasonal variation specifically? Dr. Chin paused for a fraction of a second. Global dust storm periods, temperature fluctuations, and atmospheric pressure variations. Julian wrote something down. One of the board members leaned forward. "Dr. Barrett, do you have concerns about Dr. Chen's methodology?" "I have questions about specific calculation parameters." "Dr. Chun, your thermal protection coefficients assume a Mars atmospheric density of 0.020 kilograms per cubic meter. Can you explain that assumption?" "That's within the standard range for Mars atmospheric modeling. It's actually 40% higher than current atmospheric data from Perseverance rover. Using inflated density assumptions would make thermal protection systems appear more robust than they actually are." The room was quiet. Dr. Chen's expression remained professional, but Julian could see tension building around her eyes. "Dr. Barrett," she said carefully, "atmospheric conditions on Mars vary significantly. Conservative estimates are appropriate for safety planning. Conservative estimates that overstate atmospheric density would underestimate thermal protection requirements. That's not conservative planning. That's dangerous planning. Julian turned to the board members. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with Dr. Chen's presentation, I need to share some information that directly impacts the safety of your Mars mission planning. Elon nodded. Go ahead, Dr. Barrett. Julian stood up and walked to the presentation screen. Dr. Chen, with your permission, I'd like to display some calculations I prepared. What kind of calculations? Independent verification of your thermal protection analysis. Julian connected his laptop to the projection system. The screen filled with thermodynamics equations, side-by-side comparisons, and safety margin assessments. These are Dr. Chen's calculations for atmospheric entry thermal protection, Julian said, pointing to the left side of the screen. These are the same calculations performed using current Mars atmospheric data and standard safety protocols. The differences were stark. Where Dr. Chen's calculations showed adequate safety margins, Julian showed critical vulnerabilities. Dr. Chen, Julian said, turned to face her directly. Can you explain why your calculations consistently overestimate thermal protection capability by approximately 12%? I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm asking why every major thermal calculation in your presentation contains systematic errors that would cause catastrophic failure during real-world Mars atmospheric entry. The room was absolutely silent. Dr. Chen's professional composure was cracking slightly, but her voice remained steady. Dr. Barrett, I think there may be some misunderstanding about calculation methodologies. There's no misunderstanding. Your calculations contain deliberate alterations designed to compromise crew safety while maintaining mathematical consistency. This is an accidental error. This is sabotage. One of the board members stood up. Dr. Barrett, that's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious situation. Julian clicked to the next slide, displaying calculation timelines and file modification dates. Dr. Chen has been systematically altering thermal protection calculations for 16 months. Every major safety assessment, every thermal coefficient, every material stress analysis has been compromised to ensure mission failure during Mars atmospheric entry. Dr. Chen finally spoke, her voice sharp with controlled anger. Dr. Barrett, I don't know what agenda you're pursuing here, but these accusations are completely unfounded. Are they? Julian clicked to another slide. Dr. Chen, can you explain why you've been uploading copies of all thermal calculation data to external servers registered to Meridian Systems? The room exploded. Board members started talking simultaneously, demanding explanations, asking questions, processing the implications of what Julian had just revealed. Dr. Chen was completely silent. Furthermore, Julian continued, can you explain why you've been receiving monthly payments from a Meridian subsidiary for consulting services that aren't disclosed in your SpaceX employment records? Elon stood up. Dr. Chen, I think you need to respond to these allegations. Dr. Chen looked around the room at 8 board members and 2 engineers who now understood that she had been systematically compromising critical safety systems for over a year. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. You don't understand what you're interfering with. Explain it to us, Julian said. Dr. Chen sat down heavily. For the first time since Julian had entered the room, she looked like someone who had been caught rather than someone who was in control. The thermal protection work you're so concerned about, it's not just about SpaceX Mars missions. What's it about? It's about Project Vela. Julian felt his chest tighten. Project Vela, the classified NASA program that had been shut down after his termination, the program that had never been publicly acknowledged. Dr. Chen, Elon said carefully, what do you know about Project Vela? I know that it was designed to ensure American dominance in Mars exploration by eliminating competition from private aerospace companies. I know that it involved systematic sabotage of non-government space programs. And I know that Dr. Barrett was terminated from NASA because he got too close to discovering it. The room was completely silent. Julian stared at Dr. Chun, processing the implications of what she had just admitted. Project Vela was a NASA operation to sabotage private aerospace companies. Project Vela was a joint operation involving NASA, the Department of Defense, and select aerospace contractors. The goal was to ensure that Mars exploration remained under government control by preventing private companies from developing viable Mars mission capabilities. And Meridian Systems was part of this operation. Meridian Systems was the primary contractor for technical sabotage. We provided compromised calculations to target companies while protecting approved projects. Julian felt 3 years of anger and vindication rising in his chest. Dr. Chun, who ordered the sabotage of the Mars sample return mission, the same people who ordered the sabotage of SpaceX's thermal protection systems. Who? Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying secrets that were too big for one person. Dr. Barrett, when you investigated the Mars sample return accident, what did you think you were investigating? Contractor negligence, calculation errors that led to thermal protection failure, and crew injuries. You were investigating the deliberate sabotage of a NASA mission by a joint government contractor operation designed to justify the cancellation of private sector Mars exploration programs. The implications hit Julian like a physical blow. The accident that had destroyed his career, the 3 engineers who had been hospitalized, the investigation that had led to his termination, all of it had been orchestrated. The Mars sample return mission was sabotaged deliberately. The Mars sample return mission was sabotaged to create justification for increased government oversight of private aerospace development. Your investigation threatened to expose the operation, so you were discredited and removed. Julian sat down heavily. 3 years of exile, 3 years of believing he had failed to protect his colleagues, 3 years of carrying responsibility for an accident that had been deliberately caused. Dr. Chun pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Dr. Chun, what are you doing? I'm sending you everything I have. Financial records, communication logs, operation protocols, personnel assignments, everything related to Project Vela and the ongoing sabotage operations. She hit send and placed the phone on the conference table. Why are you doing this? Because I never signed up to kill people. The original Vela mission was about industrial espionage and competitive advantage. But when you started developing actual Mars mission capabilities, the orders changed. The goal became ensuring mission failure, with total loss of crew. The room was absolutely silent. Dr. Chun continued. Dr. Barrett, when you investigated the Mars sample return accident, you were getting close to evidence that would have exposed the entire operation. Your termination wasn't about protecting NASA's reputation. It was about protecting a covert program that had already cost lives and was planning to cost more. Julian's phone buzzed. He looked down to see dozens of files from Dr. Chun. Financial records, email communications, technical reports, and personnel assignments for Project Vela. Julian started to respond, but his phone screen went black. He pressed the power button. Nothing. Dr. Chun, the files you sent are gone, she said quietly. Remote wipe. They've been monitoring my communications. Julian stared at his dead phone. Dozens of files documenting 6 years of systematic sabotage, evidence that could expose a covert operation involving senior government officials and major aerospace contractors. All erased. Dr. Chun, do you have backup copies? I had backup copies. On my laptop, on external drives, on cloud servers. All of it was wiped remotely 30 seconds ago. The room was completely silent. Julian felt 3 years of vindication evaporating as the evidence that could clear his name and expose Project Vela disappeared into cyberspace. Dr. Chun, who has the capability to remotely wipe multiple devices simultaneously. The same people who have been running Project Vela for 6 years. The same people who have access to government surveillance systems and military-grade cyber warfare capabilities. Julian turned to Dr. Chun. Dr. Chun, before they wiped the files you sent me, did you see anything that could help us identify who's been directing Project Vela? I saw enough. What did you see? Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. I saw that the operation goes higher than anyone in this room realizes. And I saw that we're running out of time to stop it. She started typing on her phone, but before she could finish, the screen went black. Remote shutdown, she said quietly. They're cutting off all my access. Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the worn leather notebook he had shown Elon in the Prius. Dr. Chun, I've been investigating the conspiracy for 3 years. You think I kept all my evidence on devices that could be remotely wiped? Dr. Chun stared at him. What do you mean? I mean that 40 years in aerospace engineering teaches you not to trust digital storage for information that people might want to destroy. He opened the notebook to pages covered with handwritten calculations, organizational charts, and what appeared to be detailed documentation of financial transfers and communication patterns. Dr. Chun, everything you just told us about Project Vela, I already knew. Everything you described about systematic sabotage operations, I already had evidence for. The only thing I was missing was confirmation from someone inside the operation. You've been building a case against Project Vela for 3 years. I've been building a case against Project Vela since the day I was terminated from NASA. And now I have enough evidence to expose the entire operation. Julian opened his notebook to a page covered with organizational charts and personnel assignments. Project Vela involves 17 people across NASA, the Department of Defense, and major aerospace contractors. I have financial records documenting 6 years of payments for sabotage operations. I have communication intercepts proving coordination between government officials and private contractors. And now I have testimony from Dr. Chun confirming everything I've suspected. Dr. Chun looked up from her phone. Dr. Barrett, there's something else you need to know about Protocol 7. What? It's not just about eliminating personnel and evidence. It's about eliminating the target companies as well. Julian felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? I mean that if they can't stop you from exposing Project Vela, they're going to destroy SpaceX entirely. Catastrophic failure during the next Falcon 9 launch, attributed to thermal protection system malfunction. The room was absolutely silent. Julian stared at Dr. Chun, processing the implications of what she had just said. Dr. Chun, when is the next Falcon 9 launch? Tomorrow. Crew mission to the International Space Station. For astronauts. Julian turned to Elon. Mr. Musk, you need to scrub that launch immediately. On what grounds? On the grounds that the thermal protection systems may have been sabotaged, caused catastrophic failure, with loss of crew. Julian looked around the room at 8 board members, 1 former saboteur, and the CEO of SpaceX. Outside the windows, the rocket garden stood illuminated against the night sky, monuments to human space exploration that might be about to become targets in a war they had never known they were fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian said, we have approximately 6 hours before the next Falcon 9 launch. We have documented evidence of systematic sabotage operations targeting SpaceX's thermal protection systems. And we have testimony indicating that a covert government operation is planning to eliminate this company and everyone connected to it. He opened his leather notebook one more time. The question is, are we going to let that happen or are we going to fight back? Before anyone could answer, all the lights in the boardroom went out. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the boardroom as backup power systems engaged. Through the windows, Julian could see the entire SpaceX facility plunging into darkness, then flickering back to partial illumination as generators kicked in. That wasn't a power grid failure, Elon said quietly. That was targeted. Dr. Chin was typing rapidly on her darkened phone. Cyber attack on facility systems. They're isolating us. Julian opened his leather notebook and began tearing out pages covered with handwritten documentation. Everyone take these. Financial records, personnel assignments, communication intercepts. If we don't survive the next few hours, make sure someone gets this information to the media. Julian distributed pages from his notebook around the conference table. Memorize what you can. Hide the rest. If they eliminate the people, they can't eliminate the information if it's distributed widely enough. Elon was at the windows, looking out at the rocket garden. Julian, how long do we have before the Falcon 9 launch? 5 hours and 37 minutes. Dr. Chin looked up from her dead phone. Mr. Musk, the sabotage isn't limited to thermal calculations. We've been altering guidance systems, propulsion parameters, and structural stress analyses. Every major system on that Falcon 9 has been compromised. How extensively? Extensively enough to guarantee mission failure, with total loss of crew. Julian walked to the whiteboard and began writing in the red emergency lighting. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 objectives. First, prevent the launch of a sabotaged Falcon 9 that will kill 4 astronauts. Second, expose Project Vela before they can eliminate the evidence and the witnesses. Third, survive the next 6 hours. How do we accomplish those objectives when we're isolated in a facility under cyber attack with all our digital evidence wiped? One of the board members asked. Julian smiled grimly. The same way aerospace engineers accomplished everything before digital technology. We use mathematics, physics, and human intelligence. He turned to Dr. Chin. Dr. Chin, I need you to write down everything you remember about the Falcon 9 sabotage. Every system you altered, every calculation you changed, every component you compromised. Handwritten, detailed, specific. That will take hours. You have 30 minutes. Julian walked to the conference room door and tried the electronic lock. Nothing. They've isolated us completely. No communications, no access to facility systems, no ability to warn the launch team. Then how do we stop the launch? Julian looked around the room. We get out of this room. We get to the launch control center, and we stop the launch manually. Julian walked to the windows overlooking the rocket garden. Dr. Chun, what's the fastest way out of this room without electronic access? She looked around the space, calculating. Emergency fire suppression system. If we trigger the halon gas release, it will automatically unlock all doors for emergency evacuation. Where's the manual trigger? Behind the glass panel, next to the whiteboard. Julian walked to the emergency panel and smashed the glass with his notebook. Alarms began blaring immediately, and within seconds, the conference room doors clicked open as emergency protocols engaged. Everyone out. Stay together. We're going to launch control. They moved as a group through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the wail of fire suppression alarms. Julian led them toward the stairwell. The elevators were non-functional. Stairs, Elon said, pointing toward an emergency exit. Launch control is on the second floor. They climbed 2 flights of stairs and emerged into a corridor lined with mission control rooms. Most were dark, but Launch Control Room Alpha showed signs of activity. Emergency lighting, computer screens, and the shadowy figures of technicians preparing for the morning launch. Julian approached the security door leading to launch control. Dr. Chun, any ideas? She studied the door and the adjacent wall panels. Emergency medical override. If someone has a medical emergency during launch operations, there's a manual override that unlocks all doors for paramedic access. Julian looked at his watch. 4:47 a.m. 4 hours and 53 minutes until launch. Trigger it. Dr. Chen smashed the glass and pressed the red button. Immediately, different alarms began sounding and the launch control door clicked open. Julian led the group into Launch Control Room Alpha. 6 technicians looked up from their consoles, confused by the emergency alarms and the sudden appearance of the CEO and 8 board members at 4:47 a.m. Tom, Elon called to his head of propulsion systems, who was reviewing launch checklist data. I need you to implement an immediate technical hold on the Falcon 9 mission. A technical hold? Elon, we're 4 hours from launch. Everything's been checked and verified. Tom, we've identified critical safety issues that require immediate review. Julian stepped forward. I'm Dr. Julian Barrett, former JPL Senior Systems Engineer. Your thermal protection calculations contain systematic errors that will cause catastrophic failure during atmospheric reentry. Tom looked confused. Dr. Barrett, our thermal calculations have been reviewed and approved by Dr. Chun and the entire thermal systems team. Dr. Chen's calculations are compromised. Every thermal coefficient, every safety margin, every material stress analysis has been deliberately altered to ensure mission failure. Dr. Chen looked up from a mission status console where she had been typing rapidly. We have a bigger problem. The alterations aren't limited to thermal protection, guidance systems, propulsion parameters, structural calculations, emergency abort procedures. Everything has been compromised. How extensively compromised? Extensively enough that mission failure is guaranteed regardless of which system fails first. Julian felt his chest tighten. For astronauts preparing for what they believed was a routine mission to the International Space Station, unaware that every system on their spacecraft had been designed to fail. Dr. Chun, can you quantify the sabotage? Propulsion problems within the first 2 minutes of flight. Guidance errors during orbital insertion at approximately 8 minutes. Thermal protection failure during re-entry in 3 days. So the crew won't survive the launch phase? The crew won't survive the first 2 minutes. The launch control room was absolutely silent. 6 technicians stared at Dr. Chun as the implications of what she had just said settled over them. Tom spoke first. Dr. Chun, are you saying that the Falcon 9 launching in 4 hours is designed to explode during the ascent phase? I'm saying that the Falcon 9 launching in 4 hours has been systematically sabotaged to ensure catastrophic failure at multiple points during the mission, beginning with propulsion system failure within 2 minutes of launch. Julian walked to the launch director's console and began typing rapidly. Mission abort codes, emergency shutdown procedures, crew evacuation protocols. Dr. Barrett, what are you doing? I'm implementing emergency protocol Foxtrot. Immediate mission termination due to critical safety threats. You don't have authority to implement emergency protocol Foxtrot. Tom, in 40 years of aerospace engineering, I've seen 3 launches proceed despite safety concerns because the approval process was too slow. All 3 resulted in loss of crew. I'm not watching it happen again. Julian's fingers moved across the keyboard, entering abort codes and safety override commands. Warning messages began appearing on screens throughout launch control as automated systems responded to emergency shutdown orders. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he walked to his console and began entering his own authorization codes. Tom, what are you doing? I'm implementing Emergency Protocol Foxtrot under my authority as head of propulsion systems. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the facility as automated systems responded to emergency abort commands. Mission status displays shifted from green to yellow to red as launch preparations were automatically terminated. Tom, you just scrubbed a multi-million-dollar mission 4 hours before launch. Tom just saved 4 lives, Julian said quietly. Emergency communications came to facility speakers. All personnel, this is launch control. We have implemented Emergency Protocol Foxtrot. Mission abort in effect. All crew preparation activities are terminated immediately. Julian walked to the communications console and activated the crew briefing channel. Crew Commander, this is Dr. Julian Barrett, Senior Consulting Engineer. We have implemented emergency mission abort due to critical safety issues identified in thermal protection and propulsion systems. The crew commander's voice came through clearly. Dr. Barrett, can you provide specifics on the safety issues? Commander, systematic sabotage of multiple spacecraft systems designed to cause mission failure with loss of crew. Will provide complete technical documentation within the hour. Sabotage? Dr. Barrett, are you saying our spacecraft was deliberately compromised? Julian looked at Dr. Chun, who nodded. Commander, that's exactly what I'm saying. Your spacecraft was deliberately compromised by a covert operation designed to cause catastrophic failure and eliminate private space exploration capabilities. The communications channel was silent for several seconds. Dr. Barrett, we're going to need a full technical briefing. You'll have it. And Commander, you and your crew are alive right now because we identified the sabotage in time. Julian ended the communication and turned to face the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we prevented one disaster. Now we need to expose the people responsible before they can try again. Elon approached the main communications console. Julian, how do we get word out about Project Vela when all our digital communications are compromised? The same way we prevented the launch. We bypassed digital systems and used direct human communication. Julian opened his leather notebook and began tearing out more pages. Tom, I need you to contact every major aerospace journalist, every congressional representative on the science committee, and every NASA administrator who isn't connected to Project Vela. Physical delivery of documentation, direct verbal communication, multiple simultaneous disclosures. Dr. Chen looked up from a console where she had been writing detailed technical specifications. Dr. Barrett, I've documented everything I can remember about the sabotage operations. Specific alterations, technical parameters, financial transfers, personnel assignments. How detailed? Detailed enough to prove that Project Vela exists, detailed enough to identify the people responsible, and detailed enough to prevent future sabotage operations. Julian took Dr. Chen's handwritten documentation and added it to his notebook. Dr. Chen, are you prepared to provide formal testimony about everything you've told us? I'm prepared to provide formal testimony, knowing that it will probably result in criminal prosecution and possible elimination by the people I'm exposing. Why are you willing to do that? Dr. Chen looked around Launch Control Room Alpha at the mission status displays showing the aborted launch, at the crew preparation schedules that would never be completed, at the faces of people who now understood how close they had come to watching 4 astronauts die. Because I spent 2 years following orders to sabotage aerospace safety systems, and I never asked myself what would happen when people started dying. Tonight, I finally asked that question. Julian closed his notebook and looked around the room. Tom, how quickly can you distribute documentation to external contacts? If I use personal vehicles and direct delivery, maybe 2 hours to reach key journalists and congressional staff. Do it. Multiple copies, multiple destinations, multiple confirmation methods. As if responding to his words, the facility lighting suddenly returned to normal. Computer systems began reactivating, and the emergency alarms gradually stopped. Elon's phone buzzed as communications were restored. He looked at the screen, and his expression shifted. "Julian, I'm getting calls from NASA administrators, congressional staff, and aerospace industry executives. Word is getting out." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that suggests some very powerful people are very concerned about what we might have discovered." Julian's phone came back to life as well. Dozens of missed calls, text messages, and email notifications from aerospace industry contacts, former NASA colleagues, and academic institutions. "Mr. Musk, it appears that our exposure Project Vela is generating exactly the kind of attention we hoped for." Julian walked to the communications console and activated facility-wide speakers. "All SpaceX personnel, this is Dr. Julian Barrett. The emergency conditions that affected our facility tonight have been resolved. The Falcon 9 mission schedule for 0730 has been scrubbed due to critical safety issues that are currently under investigation. All personnel should continue normal operations while maintaining heightened security awareness." He turned to Elon. "Mr. Musk, we need to prepare for the possibility that Project Vela operatives will attempt to discredit our testimony or eliminate the evidence we've gathered. What do you recommend?" "I recommend that we immediately contact the FBI, the DOJ, and Congressional Intelligence Committees with formal complaints about Project Vela. Multiple simultaneous disclosures to multiple agencies, making it impossible to suppress or discredit the information." Tom approached him with a phone in his hand. "Elon, FBI is on their way. ETA 90 minutes. They want to know if we can secure all evidence and witnesses until they arrive." "Tell them we can. And Tom, start preparing technical documentation for congressional hearings. This is going to be bigger than just federal law enforcement." Julian opened his leather notebook one final time and began writing. Not calculations or investigation notes, but a timeline of the night's events, from a midnight Uber ride to the exposure of conspiracy that had endangered human space exploration for 6 years. "Dr. Barrett," Dr. Chen said, approaching him with her completed technical documentation. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you were investigating the Mars sample return accident 3 years ago, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Julian thought about the question. 3 years of exile, 3 years of driving for Uber, 3 years of believing his career was over and his reputation destroyed, all leading to a midnight conversation in a Prius that had changed everything. "Dr. Chun, 3 years ago, I thought I was investigating contractor negligence. Tonight, I discovered I was investigating a conspiracy to control the future of human space exploration. Sometimes the truth is bigger than we imagine, and sometimes it takes longer to emerge than we expect. Sometimes it takes exactly as long as it needs to." Julian walked to the windows one more time, looking out at the rocket garden where Falcon 9 boosters stood ready for future missions that would now be based on legitimate calculations rather than sabotage systems. "Mr. Musk," Julian said, "when do I start?" "You started 3 hours ago when you walked into conference room 7 and proved that our thermal protection systems were compromised. Everything since then has been your first day on the job." "Mr. Musk, earlier tonight, you offered me a contract position with SpaceX. Is that offer still open?" Elon smiled. "Julian, after tonight, I'm not offering you a contract position." Julian felt his chest tighten. After everything they had accomplished, after exposing Project Vela and preventing a disaster, was Elon still concerned about the legal and professional risks of employing him? "Mr. Musk, I understand that the circumstances make it difficult to." "Julian, I'm not offering you a contract position because I'm offering you a permanent position, head of systems safety and security. Your job will be make sure that what happened tonight never happens again." Julian stared at Elon, processing the offer. head of systems safety and security, a position created specifically to prevent the kind of sabotage operations that had destroyed his career and nearly killed 4 astronauts. Mr. Musk, what would that position involve? Independent verification of all contractor calculations, direct oversight of thermal protection systems, authority to halt any mission if you identify safety concerns, and the resources to investigate any suspected sabotage operations. And the title? Elon's expression was serious but warm. Dr. Julian Barrett, Chief Systems Safety Officer, with the authority to ensure that SpaceX missions are designed to succeed, not designed to fail. Julian looked around Launch Control Room Alpha at the mission status displays showing the successfully aborted launch, at the documentation that would expose Project Vela, at the faces of people who understood that they had just prevented a catastrophe and changed the future of human space exploration. Mr. Musk, I accept. There's one condition. What's that? You have to promise me that you'll never drive for Uber again. Julian laughed for the first time in 3 years. Mr. Musk, I promise you that my driving days are over. Julian closed his notebook and put it in his jacket pocket. 40 years of aerospace engineering, 3 years of exile, and 1 midnight Uber ride had led to this moment. The moment when human space exploration became safer because someone had refused to give up on the truth. Mr. Musk, when humans land on Mars, will you remember that it started with a conversation in a Prius? Julian, when humans land on Mars, I'll remember that it started with someone who refused to let contractor sabotage go unchallenged, even when it cost him everything. Outside the windows, the first light of dawn was illuminating the rocket garden. The Falcon 9 that would have killed 4 astronauts stood silent and safe, its sabotage systems identified and corrected, its mission postponed until legitimate calculations could ensure crew survival. Dr. Chin approached them one final time. Dr. Barrett, I spent 2 years sabotaging aerospace safety systems because I was told it was necessary for national security. I spent tonight helping you expose that operation because I finally realized that national security doesn't require murdering astronauts. So you'll testify? I'll testify to everything. Project Vela operations, systematic sabotage procedures, personnel assignments, financial transfers, and technical specifications. Everything I know about 6 years of covert operations targeting private space exploration. Julian felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. The satisfaction of being right about everything while still being able to prevent the disaster he had predicted. Tom, how long before federal investigators can be here? If I call the FBI field office in Los Angeles and explain that we have evidence of a national security threat involving aerospace sabotage, probably 2 hours. Call them. Tell them we have documentary evidence, witness testimony, and physical proof of systematic sabotage operations targeting American aerospace companies. Julian looked around Launch Control Room Alpha one more time. Emergency lighting had been replaced by normal illumination. Mission status displays showed systems returning to operational status. Computer screens displayed the kind of routine technical data that made human spaceflight possible. Everything looked normal, but Julian knew that nothing would ever be the same. SpaceX would continue developing Mars mission capabilities based on legitimate calculations. Project Vela would be exposed and eliminated. Dr. Chin would provide testimony that ensured accountability for 6 years of sabotage operations. And Julian Barrett would return to the aerospace industry with a position created specifically to prevent the kind of disasters he had spent 3 years trying to expose. Mr. Musk, you ever work in aerospace? I used to build rockets that I hoped would work. And now I build rockets with Dr. Julian Barrett, making sure they work. Sometimes, Julian reflected, the future is saved by the people we almost left behind. And sometimes, an Uber driver turns out to be exactly what the world needs most.